Welcome to this week's edition of the Dugout Dish podcast. I'm Andy Kirikides, joined by my wonderful co-host, Keith Glasser. How we doing?
Great. How are you?
I'm a little jealous of that shirt you're wearing right now. It looks very comfortable.
It is. We just got done recording another one, and I mentioned that you'll see a lot of Lululemon, and this is exactly what I'm wearing right now. It's long sleeve, it's hot, and I'm still cool.
Go figure. These guys at Lulu got it figured out.
Sure do.
All right. Today's, as hopefully all of you know, because we've been running a series on it for the last month, college baseball season across all levels has officially ended. The Tennessee Volunteers and the Fighting Tony Vitellos have taken home the crown. They've taken it back to Knoxville. It was a wonderful college baseball season. The College World Series was electric. I thought the finals were specifically awesome. Just the brand of baseball that's being played, the talent that's being run out, the composure, the compete level. Me and Jonathan talked about it, but like college baseball is continuing to skyrocket in terms of the product that continues to get put out on the field. And wanted to take a few minutes today to have some parting thoughts on the college baseball season. Maybe we'll talk a little bit about the transfer portal and see where this conversation takes us. So, what do you got? What's on the top of your mind here as we close out the college baseball season, Coach?
I thought the final series was pretty much everything that you could ever hope and wish for in a final series for championship baseball, right? Like, I mean, we all secretly wish for game sevens and close games and, well played baseball. We get three in the College World Series, and we got to a third game. It looked like super late that it was going, Tennessee was going to run away with it. It was, 6-1. And then, A&M climbs back in and makes it 6-5, and threatens. And, it's everything you could ever ask for, especially in an era right now where college baseball has never been more popular. Everybody is watching. Omaha is Omaha, but I think there's a lot more people that are tuning into super regionals and regionals and the buzz that you get across, the selection show. And, we've done it, and you guys did a great job, covering all this stuff over the last couple of weeks in my absence. And, I think that there's, college baseball hasn't been in a better spot historically, and maybe, I'll say this with a caveat. Like, I think the late 90s was obviously electric because like it was like -8 bats and like they were like trampolines and dudes were like, old Rosenblatt was just getting, it was a launching pad, it was electric baseball. Like, I'll be honest with you. Like, I remember watching as a kid and being like, yo, this is fire. But I don't know, like the that was just the World Series, now so many people are invested through the course of the season and, into the regionals and the super regionals and the conference tournaments and stuff. Like, there's so much more popularity around it. And I get that there's a lot more money involved and things like that. But, I saw a tweet today from, it was the first game of Tony Vitello's career at Tennessee. It was like February 18th of 2018. And they pan to after the first pitch, like it's from the third base side, and they show like the crowd, and there might have been 300 people there, maybe. Like there wasn't a lot, and I don't know that, I'm not sure that Tennessee didn't play in front of less than 3,000 this year in most instances. So like what he's been able to do there and what like what that program has become, and just like, not just him, but like A&M and, the state of college baseball right now, contrary to what you'll read on Twitter in some instances, is actually in a really, really good spot. And we'll kind of get into some of the other stuff later that everyone is doom and gloom on. But I think from a product standpoint, from a play standpoint, it's as good as it's ever been. The players are good. The players are big. They're fast. They're strong. They throw hard. Yes, there's going to be guys on the rosters that are going to be 87 to 89 with sink and throw, breaking balls that spin at electric spin rates that are not your prototypical, chasing the velo thing. Like, yes, that all of this can be true. They're not all mutually exclusive. So, I think that it hasn't been in a better spot in my lifetime, and I'm excited to kind of see what 2025 is going to bring on for us.
Yeah, the Vols started the Vitello era in 2018 to a small crowd, and they're now investing $95 million to increase the capacity to 7,500 because they got people banging down the doors to come and watch that team play. And Tennessee's not the only place that's happening, right? Like, obviously what Vitello's built there, once again, like, if you're new to college baseball, you look at Tennessee and you're like, they're the top of the food chain. They were shit forever. Prior to Vitello getting there, they went 13 straight seasons as an SEC team, which if you finish ninth in that conference, you're basically in the tournament. They went 13 straight seasons without getting to an NCAA tournament, period. And they've been to the College World Series 3 of the last 4 years. Me and Jonathan talked about this a little bit, but like Florida was the same way. For all you young cats who've been watching Florida baseball, prior to Kevin O'Sullivan going there, Florida was not a destination for kids. It was the worst facility in the SEC.
Yep.
They were getting pounded on by Miami and Florida State. What you've seen is something that guy's built. It's the same thing with Virginia. When Brian O'Connor took over the Virginia job, that was not a place that had a history of winning and winning at an incredible rate. And you're talking about a guy who I think is over the 800 win mark at this point. These guys have built programs. Like, I mean,
I could be wrong too, but on the other side of the state, I don't remember Vanderbilt being the cream of the crop until Corbs got there.
Nope. You're absolutely right.
That's something there too. Like, it's not just, everyone talks about the SEC, but there's, the ACC is really good baseball. Like, yes, like, did they get shut out of the World Series this year? Yeah, they did from a championship standpoint, but like, it was still 4-4. Like, there's still really good programs in the ACC, and there's very good programs in the SEC. But to your point, like, Tennessee was not good. They were down for a very long time until Vitello got there, and like now they rattled off 60 wins. They were 60-13 this year. Like, that's absurd. Same thing, and it's breaking right now as we're recording this, but A&M, Schlossnagel's done a great job there, and now he's jumping ship and going to Texas, which is going to be super interesting, right? Like, A&M is, he's done a very good job there. He did a very good job at TCU. I mean, they were a national power at TCU, and then he goes to A&M, and A&M is a national power when he gets to A&M. And I'm like, again, like, A&M wasn't. There's a reason he went there to build them into a national power, right? Like, it wasn't. He did it at TCU. He did it at A&M. Now he's going to Texas. We'll see what happens. Obviously, like, he's likely going to find a lot of success, but that kind of remains to be seen. But to your point, like, a lot of these places weren't destinations, and now they're pouring money into facilities to be better.
And it's had a trickle-down effect with a lot of schools that probably don't get as much shine as they should because they're not associated with like Power 5 football. But like, you're seeing, the Sun Belt always sticks out to me when you're talking about this kind of stuff and the amount of money that those programs are pumping into their baseball facilities. Like, ODU's got a new project going on. You see Troy's new setup. Louisiana Lafayette's got an electric atmosphere that they got going down on there. And you're starting to see a lot of schools realize that baseball is attractive. It's not a back burner college sport anymore. And I'm not saying that it rivals college football at the highest level or it rivals the NCAA tournament for basketball, March Madness, but it's getting in the realm where it's a big time thing. Like it's on ESPN. You can watch games from February 14th all the way to June 24th. You can watch a game every single day of the week, pretty much, except for, maybe the occasional Monday. But it's amazing. Like what's going on in college baseball right now I think it's awesome. I'm a huge fan of everything that's going on. I think that, like, you look at what they had going on in Omaha this year. I mean, you got 25,000 people standing in line to try to get into that stadium. You got Peyton Manning and Morgan Wallen showing up. Like, this isn't the Omaha. This isn't the college baseball that you only got to watch for 2 weeks a year during the College World Series anymore. It's a legitimate following. I think the regional coverage is probably my favorite part of all of this because it gives fans a chance to see the Woffords of the world, see the Niagaras of the world, and watch that, like, oh, wow, the margins are still pretty thin. Even for schools that you may not associate as like college baseball powers, like look at what Evansville did, right? They were kind of the lone big upset this year. But if you track the last 4 or 5 years of college baseball, there's one of them every year that's popping up and making it to a super. You've got Davidson, you've got VCU making it to super regionals. You got Oral Roberts making it to the College World Series last year. You got Coastal winning it. You got Fresno State winning it. It's the level of play is extremely high. And I've been thoroughly impressed across the board. I didn't see a single team in the tournament that I went, holy crap, you're completely out of place. And I think 10, 15 years ago, that wasn't the case. The 4th seed coming out of the American East was probably just going to get boat raced for 2 games. Well, not anymore. Better strap it up because Ryder might give you some freaking fits first round of the tournament, or Wofford's going to take you to the wire, whatever it is. And I think that that's my favorite part is that for the people who are paying attention, you really get to see how good the baseball is across the board. And that's fun for me because I think that's when some of these programs that fly under the radar that me and how good you have to be to play there and the type of program that they run. But for the average college baseball fan, for people who weren't involved in the sport for decades, they're getting a chance to see, like, oh wow, I didn't know VCU was going to run a dude out of the bullpen who was 96 to 99. Oh, really? I didn't know that existed. Well, yeah, they do. And that's probably my favorite part of the tournament is getting to watch the regional round and watching some of these teams surprise some folks.
Yeah, I'll say it again. Like I don't think that it's been in a better spot for as long as I've been involved. And I think that our experience in colleges, like we got to go play in a regional at LSU and there was 70,000 people there back in 2005. Like they went and built a bigger stadium and now they average like over 10 a game. I know Mississippi State's up there and, a lot of the other SEC schools, like, you're averaging 10 plus. I think Tennessee was like middle of the pack in average. They have a smaller stadium. That's why they're adding more seats. But like they still averaged almost 6,000 people a game. And that's middle of the pack in the SEC. But the SEC averages, close to 6 a game. And that's with some schools that don't really have big stadiums or draw. The ACC is well over 2,000. Like there's a lot of interest in a lot of these schools, and you're getting schools like Wake Forest that are averaging almost close to 3,000 people a game. Like, that was not on the radar when Walt took that program over, 15 years ago or whatever it was. Like, they were bottom of the barrel ACC and not very good. And, now they've added a ton of upgrades and everything they've done there. And you're averaging $3,000 a game and been to Omaha with a chance to get there again this year. So, I think top to bottom, it's a lot better. The quality of player is there. And, I think the positive to come out of the transfer portal, and I know we're going to get into this in a little bit, is like you have the ability for, especially I think last year and this year, you have the ability for a lot of the Division III kind of grad guys that you've seen, or Ivy League grad guys and things like that have transferred out, because they can at the Division III level, and the Ivy League doesn't have, like, grad guys can't play. So if they want to keep playing, they'd leave. And I know there was a kid from Columbia who was, hitting the middle lineup at A&M for the last 2 years and has had a really good run of things. That's fun to see. Like, those are kids that I've seen at camp before and went and played at, some of the best institutions academically in the country. And then they're playing at some of the best baseball schools in the country and competing for the same trophy that we were. So I think that it's like, it's interesting. Excuse me. I enjoy it. But it hasn't been in a better spot. And there's a lot of different reasons. I think we'll kind of get into most of them here, but I think you hit the nail on the head. Like, top to bottom, being able to see some of the 4 seeds make runs and 3 seeds make noise, like, that's fun to watch.
Yeah, there's just some interesting stuff to watch unfold in the College World Series for me as well. The defense really stuck out. I thought the athleticism of some of these kids really, really shined, and I think it was a good example of how important the defensive side of the game is to college baseball. But I think, I'm 100% on the Vitello bandwagon right now. And we know some folks who know him and just speak the world of him as a dude. And he's just a good guy and loves his kids and coaches with a ton of passion. But he said something after the game yesterday that I thought was really unique. And I think that this trickles down across college baseball. And I think it's really important for high school kids to realize when you get to the college level. Because I don't think it's any different across college levels. But when you get to college, it's about winning, right? Like the travel ball circuit that you're in right now, it's almost exclusively about getting recruited, right? And you can have your organizations that chase trophies and but grand scheme of things, like, nobody gives a shit. That's the truth. Like, nobody cares if you won the PG World Series in Allentown, Pennsylvania. Like, nobody cares about that stuff. But when you get to college, winning matters. And it doesn't matter if you're at Tennessee or if you're at RPI or if you're at Millersville or whatever school it is, winning matters. But Vitello said something after the game that I think kind of speaks to why they were as good as they were this year, despite the fact that you could probably argue that he's had better teams. And he said, you're in the SEC, you're all studs, but everybody needs to be a great teammate. And that's what pushed them over the line this year. And that's, I'm paraphrasing, but that's basically what he said is like, I got a team full of studs, like where you can bring Ariel Antigua off the bench to play defense in the 9th inning. And that kid probably won them the game with that backhand play, keeping that ball in the infield and almost throwing the dude out at first base. But you've got a kid with that much talent who comes in as a defensive replacement twice in the College World Series final. And you can see they panned to him, that kid, multiple times. He is freaking dialed in. He's communicating like he's been on the field every day since first pitch of the season. He's engaged in the game, and he goes out and he makes a difference with the opportunity that he has. And I think what Vitello is driving at is like, we won because we had guys who were willing to put the team above themselves. And when you get to the college level, there's very few guys that step onto the college campus and they are the dude right away. There's not a lot of Grahovics walking around who look like they're 22 and hit 23 bolts as a freshman in the SEC. Like, most guys need to figure out a way to get on the field. And the guys who are willing to be really good teammates can find themselves a part of something they'll never forget. If Ariel Antigua never played another game for the rest of his career, he can sit back and he can confidently say that he was a part of something that was absolutely incredible. And for Vitello in that moment on the field still to give that quote, I think it speaks to why they won. Not to say that Texas A&M didn't win because they didn't have that, because I'm sure they had the exact same thing. Like, the margins are so thin. But if that doesn't tell you how important it is to show up every day and compete and show up and be a really good teammate and make sure that you're pulling in the exact same direction as everybody else on your team, I don't know what does. And I've been thinking about that since he said that quote last night, and I thought that was pretty powerful.
Yeah, I think it's undeniable how much and how hard his kids want to play for him. And I think that if you're in this business and you've coached and you've done stuff like this, like, that's what you aspire to have your kids do. And I think that, like, to be able to do that at the highest level and in an era right now where, you know, I don't want to say that it's not popular, because I don't buy into that narrative, but, like, you do need to teach a lot of kids when they get to campus how to compete and how to play as a team to win. You know, and we've hammered on this a lot in here that, like, it's, you know, you have to work within an offense and you have to be able to carve out roles and be able to do things in order to help a team. And, like, it's exactly what we're talking about. Like, being a defensive replacement in, you know, late in a game where that saves runs and helps teams win, like, that's a huge role to be able to play on a team that wins 60-13 and won a national championship. Like, that is something where you can get buy-in from, you know, and seemingly when you watch them, like, it's seemingly guy 1 through 40. It seems like there's 9,000 people in that dugout, but, you know, from playing a roster standpoint, it's 1 through 40. But, like, those kids, and Jonathan said this before, like, those kids will run through a wall for him. And I think that is something that is super hard to do. And it's not to say that the A&M kids won't either. And there's other programs out there that won't, but, like, it is blatantly obvious with them, like, how hard they will play for him. And I think that is something that, you know, you need to tip your cap to, like him or not, like, that dude gets his kids to compete and they compete their asses off for him. And I think that that's something, especially, like, you know, in today's day and age, that, like, something to admire a little bit. And you sit back and watch, and, like, I was always struck watching them this year. And I probably didn't watch them nearly as much as Jonathan did, but I watched a decent amount of Tennessee baseball this year, you know, and even in recent years, like, they're, you know, they've been really, really good. Like, that's always something that has stood out to me. Like, you know, these kids, they will literally do anything for their head coach. And, like, and I think, like, that feeling is reciprocated from him to his players, right? And I think that that's the other thing that I think, like, really shines through, of, like, here's a dude, like, those kids will run through a wall for him because they know that, like, push comes to shove, he has their back, and no matter what, like, right or wrong, he has their back in whatever it is that they do. And he's not going to blow a kid up in the dugout or, you know, on TV if he did something stupid. Like, that's going to be a conversation that's going to be had afterwards in the clubhouse behind closed doors of, like, hey, you can't do that. Like, I'm going to, like, I got your back, but, like, you can't do that. That's something that cannot be done. But you know that those conversations are being had because, you know, it's not like, you know, like, he runs a tight ship, it's seemingly, and those kids will do damn near anything he wants them to do. And they know that, like, he has their back in whatever it is that they do. And I think that that's something, like, that's where you get that buy-in, like you're talking about, and, like, you know, of being able to play, like, yeah, they may have had better talented teams in the past, but like that was a complete team that was able to go out there and win a national championship. And I think that like you got to tip your cap to that stuff, man. Like a dude can coach, he can recruit, and his players love him. Like there's not much more you can ask for in today's game.
No, and I think it's incredibly hard to accomplish that in today's game because a lot of these kids, this isn't a knock on the kids, but like the truth is that a lot of kids want instant gratification. And if you want to be a part of something special, and I think about like Alabama football when I think about this, when you walk into a really good program, you got to understand that you're competing against the absolute best, and you might not get a starting spot right away. But if you're willing to stick it out and you're willing to be a part of something, like one, you could be a part of something special, and in the long run, it's probably going to be better for you too. Like Christian Moore wasn't a starter as a freshman; he's best player in college baseball. I know Charlie Condon. What he did this year was absolutely remarkable, but Christian Moore was just on a different level, in my opinion, from what he was able to accomplish. You know, Ariel Tiggle is another one. Like that dude's one of the most highly recruited kids in the whole country. Everybody's known about that kid for years. And he played a reserve role on this team. But I guarantee you what he learned this year through development, being able to take in the game from a different perspective, it's likely going to serve him better in the long run. And I think it's interesting, and we'll see what happens here in the next couple of days, but you don't see a lot of dudes from Tennessee going into the portal right now. And I don't know, maybe not read into it too much, but you know, like I think he's built something that's lasting enough where guys are willing to be a part of it because they know the long term is going to benefit them. And it's not the short term gratification of, well, I need to be starting 50 games a year. Like you got to earn that. And I think that's pretty unique because it's not the kid's fault, but egos get in the way of the best of us. And those guys who are willing to put their egos away, I think they're going to benefit from them. And I think that kind of speaks to some of the stuff that's going on with the portal here. But yeah, it's unique, and we'll see where he ends up going. Like obviously, they're losing a lot. You know, you're losing the Burt kid at first, dude's a savage.
Yeah, that play he made last night, it was late, maybe 7th, 8th inning, where he ranged to his right on a chopper that went over his head that the second baseman ended up fielding in like short right field, and he was able to get back to the bag and catch a moving throw. Or he catch the ball while he was moving back to the bag and get the out. Was like, I don't think people understand how hard that actually is.
Such a good baseball play.
In that spot. Like he made if that kid hit that ball, like the second I saw it go over his head, I was like, it's a single. And all of a sudden, like he's back on the bag. I was like, wow, that was a really good play. That's like to be able to do that, especially in that spot, but be able to just generally make that play regardless of when it is, like that's a super tough baseball play to make. Like that kid's really good.
Oh, he's awesome. And he was dialed in too at the plate. Like even his outs were like, oh boy, like that's a good swing. So they're going to lose some dudes. Like they're going to lose Moore. They're going to lose Burke. They're going to lose Amick. I think Cal Stark graduates, who I'm not sure if you can understate how valuable that kid is behind the plate. Seems to have a knack for the moment at the plate. You know, although if you look at his numbers, you'd be like, the kid can't hit. But like, he's still running double-digit bolts out. But what that dude does behind the plate, and you're a catcher, like you understand the value of this. That dude is a general. I mean, he's the lifeblood
behind the plate, and I think that it was fun watching I've always noticed it, but it was fun watching the finals because I thought that when you see him do it, like it's not, I wouldn't say it's all the time, but like when he wants a pitch in a certain spot in a big moment, like and they make it, whether it gets fouled off or swung through, like whatever it is, like he gets it back, and there's a lot of positive body language that he's exuding to not only his pitcher but the team, and I think that it's something that is super underrated from a catching standpoint, because I think that a lot of people, especially when you get to the college level and everything, like you need to be, as a catcher, one of the more calm people, because all eyes are on you 95% of the time. Like, yeah, they're watching the pitcher, but like they're getting the signs from, well, in the old days, they were getting the signs from you. And, then the ball gets delivered to you. Like, you're making the calls defensively. Like, there's a lot going on for catchers. And when you start to panic, everyone else panics. And then that's when we, our tent collapses. So I thought that, like, that kid's body language and his energy and his effort and everything that he puts out there, I couldn't have been more impressed with that kid.
Well, funny you bring up the signs. Did you notice that Tennessee went to the regular sign system?
I did, but I also noticed that I don't think A&M used the watches at all this year. I think Schlossnagle calls everything from the dugout.
Interesting. I'm not sure if I picked up on that, but
I thought was interesting, being that, like, here's two of the teams that were legitimately 1-2. I mean, Arkansas was obviously in the mix for a while. But Tennessee and A&M were top 5 team, I shouldn't, not all year, but, A&M was up there, and then obviously Tennessee for a very long time. Like, I thought it was interesting that, like, they're pretty old school when it comes to a lot of that stuff. Like, there's not really, you don't see watches on everybody, and I don't care either way, but right? Like, I honestly don't care. I just thought that it was interesting that, like, with the amount of technology and everything that you can use, like, I do think the catchers have the earpiece in and they're calling in pitches that way. But everyone has the watch that, like, everyone sees the pitch and knows where it is, and you have your 6-4-3 charts and everything. Like, I didn't really see it.
Well, the funny thing is that I saw, this is why Twitter is great. I guess when it was in the second game, a kid from Tennessee slid into third base and his PitchCom watch fell off, and the A&M kid grabbed it. And I don't know what the rule is on this, because I'm not up to date on the rules, but apparently A&M got the watch and they don't have to give it back. Like, I don't know how that works.
I love
but they
that.
didn't have to get it back. So Tennessee had to just scrap their watches. Otherwise, they're just punching in everything, and the dude's over in the corner of the A&M like, "Oh, I got you signed." So I thought that was funny. But no, Cal Stark, like, unsung hero. Like, you got dudes playing hurt. Hayden Schatz playing on 1.5 leg and just continues to put together professional at bat after professional at bat after professional at bat. That left on left slider, left on left 2-strike slider that he hit back up the middle yesterday might have been my favorite at bat of the whole college baseball season. And I'm a little partial because he's a former Columbia guy, but you're talking major pressure spot. Dude's ripping off 84-mile-an-hour snapdragons left on left. He fouls the ball off down the left field line, clearly doing anything that he can to try to score that run from third base, trying to elevate the ball there. Just a professional approach. And then the next pitch, he gets a nasty slider, and he's able to stay behind it just enough to hit it hard enough up the middle and score that run. But for the people who don't know the game within the game and haven't watched Hayden hit for several years now, he wasn't trying to get a hit there. He was trying to score that run. And I think there's a difference, and it resulted in a hit. But his willingness to make sure I need to get this ball in play, either on the ground in the middle of the field, or I need to find a way to elevate a ball. That's college baseball in a nutshell. That's the stuff that wins you games. And yeah, they came up a little bit short, but at bats like that are why A&M was even in that position. And then the kid, is it Easterling? I can't think of his last name, but the kid who made the just incredible slide.
Oh, yeah.
He's playing hurt. That was such a beautiful baseball play because he scores from first base. Laviolette takes that ball off the wall. The ball got hit 406 feet and didn't get out of the park.
Mm-hmm.
Just absolutely smushed. And
Laviolette the play off the wall was absurd because it like hopped like right up to him and like he was damn near throwing it within what seemed like 0.2 seconds.
Bare hand. He doesn't crow hop. It's ball in hand, ball out of hand.
And that relay throw was absurd.
Get it to your infield. The relay throw is perfect. And you have just the catcher
got himself out of position.
You just had a beautiful play at home plate, and the kid made a slightly better slide than the tag. And that was the difference in that game. Like, that's how thin the margins are.
Mm-hmm.
But watching that play as a former coach, like, that was a thing of beauty. Like, it was so perfect. It was a beautiful swing. It was great base running. It was hard baseball. It was an incredibly well executed relay play with a beautiful slide at the end. Like, I don't know. For me, that's the stuff that fires me up when I watch baseball, is watching those moments unravel.
Oh yeah,
because you know that that's been practiced, and you know that in that moment, pretty much everybody did everything that they had to do in that one play. Like, nobody messed that play up. It's just, it was beautiful. It was a beautiful play. And Laviolette is one hell of a baseball player, by the way. For those of you who didn't know, that he'll probably be a first-round pick next year, but I digress. Sorry, if you can't tell, listeners, I'm a sucker for good defense. And I just thought that was just a wonderful, wonderful play. Any other thoughts on the series here, Coach? Anything else that stuck out to you for college baseball?
No, I think we nailed it.
All right. Well, let's try to flip the Twitter frown upside down and try to talk some sense into the college baseball is crumbling at our feet, and the transfer portal is ruining everything, and NIL money is the blah, blah, blah. Let's talk about it from a more regional perspective, and instead of being the old head who shits on new age baseball because you think that the best baseball ever was in the 90s, let's talk about the fact that the game has evolved. It's evolved at the big league level, and it's certainly evolved at the college level. And, you got the portal and you got NIL money. So I'm going to throw that out as a little teaser. Where do you want to start with that one?
I would start with, I am not all doom and gloom here. I don't necessarily, and we've talked about this. I feel like we talk about this topic every week. And I know that we don't, because we track all of this stuff. But that said, like it seems so prevalent every day. And, I've had conversations with people recently, both, parents and people who are not necessarily in the baseball world. And, you get your news and you hear about it all over the place that the transfer portal is the worst thing ever. And I don't necessarily believe that to be true. I've said multiple times, I don't believe that it's true. It gives, kids an opportunity to be able to transfer out of bad situations and things like that. It gives coaches, right or wrong and out in saying that, you're never going to play here. So like, we'll help you instead of just making your life miserable and trying to get your money back. And I think where, a lot of people kind of get jammed up on this is what we always talk about, the nuances of what goes on. And look, I will say this, the one thing that I find to be far different in the transfer portal nowadays than it ever was before is that the best players are leaving some of the lower levels of Division III, Division II, and lower level Division I and going and playing at some of the higher levels of Division I. That is something that wasn't necessarily happening really ever before COVID because you had to sit out a year. So now it's obviously a little bit different where kids are, leaving schools like, Marist where we played and going and playing at other schools, or, when COVID hit, you had Division III guys transferring up to Division I and playing because they had a lot of years left, and that they still technically do, I believe. So there's like, that is different. Yes, I'll concede that point that is different. And that is something that, do I think there, we'll talk about this in a little bit. Do I think that like there eventually might be some rule changes and such that are going to limit those types of things? I do. Like, I think I've given my 2 cents on that, and I'll say it later. But, there isn't really a whole hell of a lot of difference right now, like, than what had previously happened. I think I texted you and Eric, maybe last week or 10 days ago, there was like 4,600 kids in the transfer portal. Like, there's 923 college baseball schools at the Division I, II, and III levels. If we average that to be 35 kids a roster, and we all know that that's not true because there's a lot of schools that have more than 35, you're pushing 33,000 baseball players. It's about 11-ish% that are in the portal. That means there's 89% of student athletes that are not in the transfer portal. So, like, it's not all doom and gloom. The other part of it is, like, not everybody in the portal is going to end up at a different school. Like, not all 4,000, whatever, let's call it, we'll ballpark at 5. Not all 5,000 of those kids are going to another school. Like, they might have to return to the school that they're at, depending on the situation, if they're allowed to. They might not have a place to go play. They might end up at a JUCO. Like, it's to me, the idea that like all of these kids are now taking spots away and going to another 4-year school, like, that's not true. Like, are a lot of them? Sure, but not all of them are. Like, some of those kids are freshmen that are like, I don't fit. Like, I want to play Division I baseball still, but I'm going to go to a junior college and then see what I can do. So everybody's, different, and to just kind of assume that everyone is doing this to try to level up and get NIL money. Like, here's a newsflash. Like, the only schools that have NIL money are the ACC and the SEC. Like, you ain't getting a lot of NIL money if you want to go play at Marist College. Like, we're alums. We know what's going on. Like, we ain't paying anyone at Marist. So, like, if you're trying to level up and get there, best of luck. But I think that, like, seeing the change of people trying to leave, or people leaving and going to the bigger schools, has now, panicked a lot of people because this has never happened before. So what do? We complain that this is the worst thing, and, programs are crumbling because, a coach, Jordan Hare left Campbell, and all those kids jumped in the portal, which, in my personal opinion, is a smart move on whoever told them that they should get in the portal. I'm not saying that they're all going to leave, but here's the thing. They don't have a head coach right now. So the kids now have a little bit more leverage to kind of be like, well, I can jump in the portal and possibly go play at another school and maybe make a couple bucks. Or, hey, I want to stay at Campbell and I'm only on 30%, but like, I had a really good year, and this guy doesn't have a shortstop, whoever comes in. So, maybe I can get 50%, and that's just as much as I was getting NIL money somewhere else. Like, I think some of the things that people struggle with is that kids have leverage in these situations nowadays where kids used to never have any of the leverage. Like, and there's no, if your head coach leaves, it doesn't matter. Like, it's a rule before all this stuff. Like, if your head coach left, you could jump in the portal immediately. Didn't matter. So I'm not all doom and gloom on it. Do I think some of the stuff can get cleaned up? Yeah, I do. Like, I thought that there should be a rule put into place, and where like you base it off of RPI or what type, like what your conference is rated. Like, if you're trying to go from the MAC into the SEC or the ACC, like, you have to sit out a year. Like, that'll dissuade some of this stuff. If you're going down, kind of like the old rules, if you're going up, you sit out. If you're going down, you don't have to. So I think that there's there are some things that there could potentially be done. I saw something the other day that people were talking about, like there should be a rule, and there might be talk of it where, like, if you go to a 4-year school, like you're going to have to stay for 2 years before you want to transfer. And I don't know necessarily how well you can police that, because I think like you're going to get some, if kids are in a bad spot, like it could be a little bit different. But I also think like a lot of this stuff that has been happening for years is now out in the open, right? Like you have people that are taking over programs, and they have a roster of whatever 30 plus kids when they get there, and a lot of those kids stay. And then after year 1 or 2, it's like, we need to get better players in here. Like they're not the guys we recruited. We can't necessarily get them better. And they start cutting loose a handful more kids than you might otherwise see. And people are like, well, what, like, this is unbelievable. There's 30, whatever, however, like they cut the whole team. Like this has kind of been happening for a long time. It's just out in the open now. And people can, because the free transfer stuff, like kids have been getting cut for a very long time. Like now you just can see it a lot more, and people don't feel as bad, because it's like, well, why do I have to feel bad? Because they can transfer wherever they want after this with no penalty. You don't have to sit out a year. There's nothing of that stuff like it used to be. So I just think that it's a little bit more out in the open, and people are, a little shocked to kind of see like, hey, this has kind of been going on for a very long time. Like, I don't necessarily think that like there's been a seismic shift for the vast majority of college baseball. Has there been at the top level? Sure. But like they've always done what they've wanted to do. Like they've been doing this stuff for decades. Like it's just now out in the open, and people are like, whoa, wait a minute. Like I would like, no, like if you've been in this business long enough, and like when I say you've been in, like you have been in this business long enough, like you've legitimately coached for a very long time. Like I want to say a very long time, but you've been in this business for 5, 6, 7, 8 years where you've coached at multiple levels. Like, that this has gone on for a long time. And to sit there and kind of say like, college baseball is, blah, blah, like, yeah, like, if you had a couple kids who played college baseball and, whatever, like, but if you haven't lived this and haven't seen this, like, this doesn't really come as a shock. Like, I think the more shock comes from the people inside the business being like, all right, like the NIL stuff is a little out of control. Like, you're essentially just paying a bunch of free agent kids to come in here and coach college or play college baseball, which like, there's no rules on that right now. Do I think if you clean that up and, actually do what it was intended to do, like, I think you have a little bit, it slows the portal down a little bit more. There are some things that way that I can get behind, but to say that like a lot of this stuff has never happened before, I can't get behind. Kids have been transferring for years. Coaches have been dumping kids for years. Like it's just out in the open because you have free transfers. You can transfer as much as you want without penalty. Like, hey man, it's just, this is what it's been. And if you've been in this business long enough, I don't think you're necessarily really, really shocked at it.
No. And I mean, you bring up great points. Like, I think the biggest, and I'll piggyback off kind of what you said, but I think the biggest eye-opening occurrence this portal cycle is the amount of undergraduates that have gone in, where you're seeing kids go from the MAC or the AAC or wherever and trying to move up. That's probably been the biggest shock for most people outside of it, but I don't think it was a real shock for anybody in college baseball that a kid like Ethan Conrad at Marist hits 400 with 10 bolts and 20 doubles and 14 triples, runs a 6'5", 6'3", 210 pounds, that kid wasn't going to jump at the opportunity to go into the portal knowing that there's hundreds of thousands of dollars waiting for him. Like, we weren't shocked. We were waiting to find out where he was going to commit before he went into the portal.
Right.
Because, like, what are you supposed to say to the kid? Like, that's the thing that all these Twitter bros don't put themselves in the situation of the kid. And this isn't that all these kids are getting this kind of money. And I think that to your point, like the two things can be true at once here, but there's a lot of kids who are going into the portal and it's not going to work out for them because they're going in for the wrong reasons. Right. But to be mad at a kid, the funny thing is the coaches aren't mad at him. That's what I find is really funny, that the world is mad at them, but their own coaches at their programs, because we have spoken to these guys, they're not mad at these kids for going into the portal because they get it. They understand. If you're 19 years old and you know that if I go into the portal, I'm going to make $100,000 next year. How the hell can you as an adult tell a kid that that's not a good decision for him to make? And that he's turning the back on his coaches that developed him and like, no, like get out of here with that. Because we just had a situation where Jim Schlossnagle told everybody that he ain't leaving A&M and signed a contract with Texas the next day.
Last night he said, I find it, what did he say? What was the word excuse me, verbiage he used?
Oh, what was his exact word?
I find it something incredibly disrespectful-ish that you would even think about asking that question. We just lost the national championship, blah, 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 blah. I've always wanted to be in A&M. I left my family. I'm not leaving A&M. And less than 24 hours later, people are reporting that they knew he was leaving before the final series started. And then we have people that are mad at kids for taking $100,000. Like this guy literally just said on national TV was like, I'm never leaving. I can't believe you'd ask me that question. Oh, by the way, I already signed that deal 3 days ago. Yeah. Now I don't know if that's true, but the fact of the matter is less than 24 hours later, he was gone and going to Texas.
Get out of here with that. Get out of here with that. Are there ways that it can be? Can you put some constraints on it that might help it be a little bit smoother? Is there a cap? I've been a proponent of split up Division I baseball. I don't think it's a crazy idea at this point. Go to the football model where if you're willing to put a certain amount of money and you're willing to have a certain kind of facility, you can play Division I baseball, just like football. A lot of people probably don't know that, but if you want to play Division I football, FBS, is it FBF or FCS? Whatever one Alabama's in, right? SEC, Big 12, whatever, that one. The one that Michigan won this year. If you want to play at that level, you have to meet certain requirements at an institution level. You need to have a certain amount of money. You need to sponsor your program through a certain amount of scholarships. You have to have a certain capacity in your stadium to even qualify. I don't think that that's the craziest thing to do with college baseball because there's a clear separation that's going on. The NIL stuff is just exasperating it, but the separation has been huge for a long time. It's not a coincidence that Coastal Carolina and Fresno State are the only mid-majors to win championships in the last 30 years, right? So if you really want to pump into baseball, go ahead. Maybe you compete for a different trophy because let's be honest, the fact that St. Peter's and Texas A&M and Tennessee compete for the same trophy is wild.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it is what it is. And I think that's the thing that rubbed me the wrong way the most about all the Twitter bullshit is that they make these blanket statements and they don't consider the nuance of it and they don't consider kind of the reality of the situation. And they just paint it as this blanket, dark cloud that sits over college baseball. And it's not all bad. And the funny thing is that, are some of the coaches geez, this is different. I have to adjust how I'm going to recruit now. But I don't hear a lot of coaches just bitching and moaning about the transfer portal because they're all using it to a certain extent. If you're at the lower level of Division I, you're going and finding the best Division III kid because as you've seen, those kids can compete at a really, really high level in college baseball. North Carolina's starting second baseman was from Arcadia College in freaking Pennsylvania. Most people don't even know what school that is. Starting center fielder from Virginia Tech who won the ACC batting title went to Elizabethtown College in the Landmark Conference, right? There's plenty of good baseball players out there. So you just need to shift how you do it. So I don't hear a lot of coaches giving me the woe is me. Well, I just lost my best guy to the portal. Most of these guys who are at least sensible are going, okay, well, I have to change how I do things. And I have to take into consideration that if I'm at the lower level of Division One, I need to now plan that my best sophomore is probably not going to be here for his junior and senior year. And that's okay, because that kid has gotten good enough where he can go play at a level above me. Right. And it's funny that you have these people who don't coach, who haven't coached at the college level. And almost every one of them to a man has never coached at the college level, complaining about this. But the guys who are actually doing it,
they have, it's not for a career. It's
but the guys who are doing it aren't the ones complaining about it.
No,
some of them are leaning into it. And I think they might actually benefit from it. Where you can tell a kid, if you're at name whatever school, hey man, if you come here and you're awesome, like you got a chance to go do some stuff bigger than us, and that's okay.
Yeah, I think that part I find to be incredibly interesting, right?
Very interesting.
Like I don't, because here's, I think you have to, like, you're making a massive shift. If that was the route that you would go, you're making a massive shift in what you're doing culture-wise and trying to keep an entire program of guys to be like, okay, like the vast majority of you are going to stay, but we're likely going to lose our best players over the course of, once or twice over the course of your career if you stay for 4. And I think, like, I don't necessarily know how I would navigate that. That's obviously something I haven't given much thought to. But I do think that like, I know that I've seen some of that stuff on Twitter out of people, and I find it to be a rather interesting tactic. And I don't necessarily know if it, like, I don't think it's right or wrong. I think that it's something that you can certainly do to adjust with what's going on, right? And I think that there's, I think a lot of people, like, yes, it doesn't mean that, like, when your best player does leave, you're not, like, ecstatic about it and, fired up. Like, you're probably a little upset. But, like, I think, like anything else, like, you get it. Like, how are you supposed to tell a 19 or 20-year-old kid that you shouldn't go take $100,000 or $200,000 or 150, whatever it is? And when you can, continue to pay for college at whatever school you're at, or you can, not have to pay for college for the rest of your life and also make money. I think that's like, people, like, when you think of it that way, like, it's a little bit harder to kind of not necessarily, at least understand the mindset and the thought process behind what that is. And that's where I think that, like, a lot of people miss the mark of, if you're 19 years old and someone tells you that, hey, you can go play, you can play every day and at this higher level, and you can make $150,000 and you have zero student loans and debt when you leave, plus you're making money, like, what would you do? And I think you're lying if you say, well, I would stay. Like, you might, but you're going to give it a really, really, really long, hard thought about what you're doing, because 19-year-old you doesn't necessarily care about your student debt and your loans and everything that you have now. So I think that, like, not being able to necessarily put yourself in the shoes of some of the young men that are making these decisions and just kind of being like, well, they're just leaving for everyone. Like, I find that narrative to be extremely short-sighted and really just kind of driving home the point that you just want loyalty. And I get it. Like, there's not a lot of loyalty, but, at the same time, money talks. So, and look, Chris said this last year when we talked on here, like, you can get in the portal, like, you're opting into more competition. Like, that doesn't necessarily, like, you can get your NIL money, but you also might not play. Like, that's an option that could very well happen too. So, like, you're opting into more competition and better competition. So, like, yeah, you might leave and, like, you're going to get your money, but, like, you also might not play. So, like, that's that's a factor too. Like, so that's something to consider as well. Like, yeah, man, it might work in the transfer side of things, like from a money standpoint, but like if you want to play, like you still got to compete and get after it. And if you don't, you're not going to play because they're going to bring in other guys that do. So, like there's that part of it too. Like it might not work out, and it's not going to work out for a lot, like, a decent amount of people. I'm not going to know the stats on all of it, but like, that's the other side of it. Like everyone kind of looks at this and been like, well, everyone just transfers up and they're all really good and there's no spots left. Like, no, like not everyone who transfers is going to be unbelievable where they're going, whether you're going up or down, right? Like you still have to get out there and produce and compete. Like, if you're a high school kid, like don't worry about the portal. Get out there and compete. It's the same thing. Just go compete and you're going to find yourself in a better spot. It's not all doom and gloom.
Well, and the other thing too is you put yourself in the college coach's situation where your job is on the line. Like, why would you take a high school kid who's never played college baseball when you can go get a kid who's proven that he's good at the college level? Like, make no mistake, it doesn't matter how good your travel team is. Like, high school baseball as a whole is not good. Like, I've watched plenty of it. And there's plenty of kids who are awesome high school players who get to college and they just can't hack it. So we've all recruited those kids. They get there and you think they're going to be really good and they just don't because the game's a little bit faster or they can't get acclimated to the amount of commitment that's needed to be good, because in high school they didn't really have to do that much because they were just a little bit bigger, a little bit faster, a little bit stronger. Like the playing field gets leveled significantly regardless of what level of college baseball you play. And from a coach's perspective, why would you, if you have an opportunity to take a more certain bet, if you're going to place a more certain bet, why wouldn't you place a more certain bet on a kid you have a much better and clearer picture of what his impact will be on your program? And to your point about, like, yeah, there's 1,600 undergraduates from the Division I level who went into the portal. Like, yeah, that's a lot of kids, right? And is it going to impact high school recruiting? Yeah, damn right it is. Like, there are going to be programs that are going to cut their high school recruiting in half. You can either sit here and bitch about it, or you can recognize that this is going to be impactful and you can use it to your advantage. You can use it to your advantage in the recruiting process, knowing which programs are going to do that and eliminate them if that's not what you want to be a part of, and go find a place that you can play. And then if you're awesome somewhere and you want to transfer, you can use the portal to your advantage. And if you asked me that question 8 or 9 months ago, I probably would have given you a different answer. But things change, strategies need to change, and you need to come face to face with the reality of the landscape right now, which is, if you're a high school kid, yeah, there's some high school kids out there that the portal is hurting them because they're that fringy Division I guy, and these Division I guys don't need to take a chance on you anymore. And you can play the woe is me card, or you can go find a place that's a really good fit for you. And if you're awesome and you go and you play well, then you can go into the portal and get recruited by those guys later. Like, there's nothing wrong with that either. But the doom and gloom with it, like, I think it's time to put that stuff to bed because it's here. And like, will it change? I don't know. I don't know if anybody expected it to go this route 4 years ago. I think there were whispers of it, and there was some different stuff that happened. And obviously you had COVID, which probably played a big factor in this. But, it could change next year. They might put some serious guardrails on this, and all of a sudden it changes again. And then there'll be somebody bitching about how they shouldn't have changed it. And it's like, well, all right. Like, unfortunately, you don't make the rules. You have to play within them. And if you're going through this process as a high school kid, I implore you to not use it as an excuse, but use it as a piece of knowledge to help you better navigate the landscape and understand where you're at. Be open to other opportunities, or, just be aware that it's out there and that it is a thing.
Yeah, and I think it gives kids an opportunity for new starts, fresh starts, for a multitude of different reasons, and a lot of times it's, we put it on the kids, and we've talked about this before. It's like the kids are the low hanging fruit, whether or not they're in college or the high school kids, they're always the low hanging fruit to kind of hammer on with this stuff. But and is it warranted in some situations? Yeah, it is. It is. But again, college coaches don't hit it 100%. So they miss on guys. And this gives them, this is like the guarantee fairy from Tommy Boy, where, it gives you an opportunity where you have an out at pretty much every single point in time throughout the course of the year to just be like, well, the guarantee fairy came and we can go get someone else. This
that
guy
might be the greatest reference in the history of the podcast.
But you know what I mean? It lets you sleep at night because it's like, wow, if we miss on something, we take some of these fringy kids, and if we miss on them, we can just tell them to jump in the portal, and we can either get a portal kid or we can, get someone else. And that's something that, when you were recruiting before and you had to kind of live with your decisions and what you made, you really worked through a lot of that stuff beforehand. And some of those fringy kids that you weren't necessarily sure if they were going to be able to pan out for you, you might shy away from. And, now it's well, he does a couple things I like. Well, let's see what he can do for a year. And if it doesn't work, it's well, it's no skin off our back. We tried, he didn't get any better. He's not going to help us. Hey man, jump in the portal. And especially if you have no money and you're a walk-on, that's just kind of what that's happened for a long time. It used to just kind of be well, he's got no money. Hopefully we can get him to quit and get his roster spot back so that we can go get someone else in that spot. And sometimes those guys pan out. That's why you end up taking taking those chances on some of those guys that might not necessarily be, frontline guys and guys that are going to be backups and guys that you need in those spots. But that's just kind of what it is, and I think there's a kid that Coach Rossi and I always talk about, Mike Allen. If he's ever listening to this podcast, which I doubt it. Mike Allen was a kid that played at Siena. He had a phenomenal career. But he was a fringy Division I kid that, we recruited, and I wasn't necessarily sold that he was going to really even be able to play at all. But he was defensively, he was good. He made all the plays. That's how he got in the lineup his freshman year. He played a lot, because of his defense. And he ended up, not that he had outstanding numbers. He was never an all-conference player, but, the kid hit 285 to 300 every year, played super solid defense, and played a lot of college baseball. And, that was a kid that was a super fringy Division I kid and developed into a guy who played every day, so that that happens just as much as, guys that are fringy Division I guys that don't pan out and end up having to transfer to a Division II, a JUCO or Division II or Division III, whatever it is, but that's always happened. Is there a tad bit of a number uptick? I'm sure there is. I don't have the transfer data from 2004 and 2010 and now, right? I don't know what those numbers look like. I would venture a guess that there is an uptick, but it's not, we weren't going from 3% to 12%, if that makes sense.
Yeah, we were getting transfers back in the day. Pat Feeney, Joe Sargent, Adam Pernasolici, yeah, Justin Laporte, Clemson, Maryland, Coastal Carolina, and UConn.
Yeah. See? We were getting Brian McDonough from Tufts.
And smashed. Believe it or not, there was transfers before the transfer portal.
It happened. I played with them. But there, I don't, and I'm in a spot right now in my life where I'm trying to be as positive as I can on a lot of stuff. But I haven't been doom and gloom on the transfer portal from the jump. Even when I was look, I didn't do a whole hell of a lot of it when I was coaching. We were a high end academic school where it was a little bit more difficult to transfer in credits from other universities. Not everything was going to transfer in. So it was a little bit more difficult to, to really hammer the transfer portal and try to get guys to come. Like, did we have transfers? Yes, we did. But, it had to be a circumstance in which the academics were going to be able to transfer in, because a lot of times kids were going to lose almost damn near a full semester, depending on what your major was, and that's putting people back. And, it was a little bit of a different animal for us when I was at RPI, but to think that we weren't recruiting transfers and JUCO guys and things of that, and I know JUCO guys aren't in there, but to think that we're not recruiting those guys when I was at Siena and West Alabama, is patently false. That's 2009, 2010, 2011. We were recruiting transfers over a decade ago. So I think that's the one thing that kind of gets lost on this. This is some brand new thing that is, no one has ever transferred in the history of college baseball. Like I said at the start, when we got into the portal stuff, is I think the biggest difference is that you have a lot of kids from the lower levels trying to transfer up. Yeah, that's a little bit of a shock to the system, but to sit and think that no one has ever transferred before, I think it's more the idea that kids have a little bit more leverage in this process now. And look, how the big schools take the leverage out of the process? They have money to offer, so they have a little bit of leverage, but it also gives the kids a little bit more leverage at the lower levels for that stuff. So, and I think that's where a lot of people might not necessarily find comfort in that. Unfortunately, you gotta start to be. It's that saying they say, you got to be comfortable being uncomfortable, and we can throw all the cliches out, adapt or die,
that's my motto. That's my motto, Keith.
You gotta.
Everybody Wang Chung tonight.
You gotta get David Goggins on here to tell people to stop bitching and just stay hard. But
if you're listening, David, I did the 4x4 by 40. Raise some money. So if you want to come on the pod, we'd love to have you.
We're coming off the rails here, people. This is our first time back together in over a month. So coming off the rails here a little bit.
But all right. Well, I think we covered some good stuff today. College baseball is awesome. Transfer portal is not the worst thing in the world.
Yeah, it's not. It's not.
Those are the two big takeaways. College baseball is awesome.
Well, and here's the thing. I do want to touch on this just briefly before we end, because I thought you made a super interesting point that everyone gets mad at the kids, but then, and I don't know Jim Schlossnagle from a hole in the ground, but it's a super interesting argument to make where last night he was I'm never leaving. And it's kind of one of those things you read that and you were like, this guy's leaving. You know what I mean? No one digs their heels in that hard and then actually stays. That person always leaves, right? There's other famous examples that don't come to the top of my mind, but what I'm talking about. I'm never going to leave. No, he's leaving. But it's an interesting argument to make. And this is an argument that, someone who I respect very much. He's one of my best friends, but, John Nicola, who played at Duke, he's always kind of had this argument of it's a free market system for the coaches, but the kids, they have to play by all these rules of not being able to transfer, and you have to sit out and you have to do all this stuff. This is kind of the perfect example of that, of we're complaining that the kids want to transfer out and do this stuff, but at the same time, a coach can sit there after losing game 3 of the national championship and be like, I'm never leaving. And then less than 24 hours later, be like, it's like a Michael Scott moment.
You're not talking about,
and he's making more money. That they're going to commit more money into Texas. All those things are likely going to be true. And this is all breaking right now as we're recording this podcast. So you're going to hear this and we'll have a lot more information by the time this actually airs. So we don't know all the things that are true in this moment. But I think that's an interesting argument surrounding the transfer portal type stuff is it's a free market for the coaches to go and do what they want, but it's not for the kids when there's money involved. And I do find that to be a rather interesting thing, because I'm interested to kind of see what Twitter has to say about a lot of this stuff. if we're going to complain that kids shouldn't, they shouldn't be able to transfer off and do all this stuff, well, then like coaches should be 1,000% honest in what they're doing. And when asked if you're leaving, don't go on some soliloquy about how you're never going to leave and you blah, 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 blah. And then 12 hours later be like, JK, LOL, I'm out. Like, I mean, I don't know how else to put that. Like and again, this is literally happening as you and I are recording this. So like
you're spot on. Like to think that
trying to get information as we do this, but like, you can't complain. And again, I think the kids are the low hanging fruit. Like we complain about the kids, but then like we have this as an example to be like, well, I mean, he just galvanized everybody. He's not leaving. Like I read that this morning, and I'm not making this up. Like, and I know it's going to sound like I am because it's happened. I read that this morning, and I was like, he's leaving. Like, you don't dig your heels in that far. Like he's gone. Like that's it. And like this afternoon, like Kendall's just tweeting like every hour. Like, might be Jim Schlossnagle, might be, and then it's like it looks like it's going to be like, and I just find that to be like, I think that's an interesting point to make. Like, how many people like outside of A&M alum, how many people are going to be like, this is stuff like this is why kids should be able to kind of do what they want, and within reason, right? Like, but like. I get the side of it that like coaching is a business and it's a career and like you have the opportunities of free market system to be able to go do what you want. But like, if you can just go do what you want, then like the kids to some extent should be able to be like, well, I can go make more money over there. So there's no trading going on. Like, here's my opportunity to jump in the portal and go make more money and better myself. Like you're doing it to better yourself and your family. Why can't I do it to better myself and my future family to do it that way?
Yeah, no doubt. I had a friend of ours text me last night before the national championship game, and the direct quote was, one of these two guys is going to win a national championship tonight and have a new job tomorrow.
He wasn't wrong.
He's freaking spot on. Yeah, I mean, and the funny thing about the coaching thing is that like kids leave for different reasons. They're not all going to make money. Like some kids are leaving programs because it's like, you know what? I don't think I'm going to play here, or like this isn't a good fit for me. Like, how are you going to get mad at an 18-year-old that has enough self-awareness to be like, this isn't the best place for me. I want to go somewhere else.
Right.
Like, this idea that kids are running from things or trying to take money, like most of these kids who go into the portal are going in for a variety of different reasons. And it's just easier to make blanket statements. That's really all it is, to just be like, because everybody's scared to compete. Like, no, like that's not the case all the time. Like sometimes you get a kid who goes somewhere and he's like, you know what? I actually want to play and I don't think I'm going to play here because the writing's on the wall. I'm the 19th guy on a 20-man staff. They're bringing in 8 more arms next year. Like, it's not going to work out for me here, but I want to play college baseball. I don't want to just be a bench warmer. So, maybe I committed to whatever school, and you know what? I want to be a little bit closer to home. I didn't think that being 8 hours away from home was going to be that big of a deal until I was 8 hours away from home, and I'd like to be a little bit closer to my family. Like, how the hell are you going to get mad at a kid for that? Get out of here with that. Ridiculous.
We're coming off the rails here. We need the South Park guys on here for our absurd voices of our Twitter people. But I agree. Like there's, we had a handful of kids that when I was at RPI that transferred out, and like, this was obviously long before the portal thing was a big deal, but like, 99.9% of the time it was like, I can't handle it academically here. And it has nothing to do with anything else. Like, this is just a tough place to get through academically, and it is. RPI is a really, really tough place to get through academically, and it was hard for kids, some of those kids, and it was better for them to recognize that early. And then, we were able to help them find places where they could land and still play college baseball, and all of them did. But play college baseball and find a place that was going to be able to, they were going to find success on and off the field and in the classroom. And like, ultimately, that's what you're looking for. Like, if the kids are struggling academically, like what, you want them to fail out of school, and then what? Like, what good is that doing anybody? you know, or socially or emotionally, whatever it might be, you know, come on, man. Kids want to play college baseball, let them go find success. They're not all trying to go get NIL money and do all this stuff. Like, it is what it is.
Trying to get that bag.
Doom and gloom.
All right.
Rainbows and sunshines.
That's where I live my life. The rainbows, baby. All right. Well, this was a fun one. It's good to be back on.
It is. Hopefully people learned something tonight.
If not, hopefully we gave you a couple chuckles this time around. We try to keep the mood enjoyable for our listeners. But thanks for listening, everybody. We'll have some more topics coming up here in the coming weeks. But hope you enjoyed. Hope you learned something, and we will we'll catch you next week. Thanks, everybody. Thank you for listening this week. If you're watching on YouTube, go ahead and hit that subscribe button and smash that like button for us. Check us out on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, as well as Spotify. You can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at EMD Baseball. If you want to find out what me and Keith do to help families and players navigate the recruiting process, go ahead and check us out on emdbaseball.com. Take a few minutes to check out our new online academy. I promise you'll get some good information out of that. Thanks again for listening. Check in with you next week.